It's the breaking news story this hour. The High Court in Malawi has reviewed and set aside the decision of the chief magistrate in Lilongwe that ordered the extradition of controversial couple Shepherd and Mary Bushiri to South Africa. Zoleka Qodashe joins me in now for more on this. Zoleka, thank you so much for your time. A quick reaction to this and perhaps maybe even a summary of essentially what the papers said. Very quickly we saw that some of the issues that were raised were issues particularly around the safety of the couple. Talk to us about it.
That's correct, Veronica. Good evening and good evening to the viewers. Well, you'll remember that this matter stems from the judgment of the chief resident magistrate in Lilongwe in March this year that essentially ordered that the Bushiri couple, that's the self-proclaimed pastor or self-proclaimed prophet, Shepherd Bushiri, as well as his wife, Mary Bushiri, be extradited to South Africa after that application by South Africa for their extradition as the requesting state in that matter. And so the High Court now was approached by the Bushiris to review and set aside that particular decision after the couple raised several issues about the law as well in Malawi. Among them is the fact that they argued, and successfully it seems, have argued that the chief magistrate did not allow them an opportunity to have their say heard before the court. Now, it was also argued that because it was not a trial, that was not necessary in that particular extradition process or that court process. And as a result, that was not a necessity in that process. But the Bushiris argued that that was a violation of the audi alteram partem rule. That's a natural justice principle, which essentially says that the other party must be allowed to have a say, or to have, it essentially means have another party have the say or hear the other side. And so among those several other factors, that is another factor that was considered by the court, with the court agreeing, the High Court agreeing with the Bushiris that they were not given an opportunity to have their say in violation of that natural justice principle. There's also the issue of the counts of rape that they were facing before the Lilongwe Magistrates Court, in which it was argued that, or the Bushiris argued that these counts of rape, the alleged victims were not named, and so they could not justify, or the state could not justify, why there was an A to H in that matter, whereas there were 3 counts that could be sustained, at least those allegations that may have been sustained before the court. But they also argued essentially, and successfully so, that the magistrates' courts, that's the lower courts, relied on hearsay evidence, and that there was no concrete evidence that was presented before the court to actually sustain those allegations against them. And instead, it was in the form of an investigator who themselves heard from complainants. And so there was no direct evidence before the court for that particular victory for the South African government in the magistrates court, where the chief resident magistrate actually ordered that they be extradited to South Africa. So a number of grounds, and when the Bushiris actually approached the High Court, they presented 15 grounds upon which they wanted the judgment of the lower court to be reviewed and set aside, and much of those have been sustained, Veronica.
Well, certainly it's a victory for the Bushiris, but perhaps another embarrassment for our justice system. We'd have to go back a little bit and look at essentially why this controversial couple was in the headlines to begin with. They were facing fraud allegations as well as money laundering to the point where they received bail, but they skipped the country. How much of this is an embarrassment to our justice system, but perhaps also the message it sends in regards to this extradition process, which has been quite dragged out, if you will?
That's correct. And I think when that happened, that was in 2020 when they skipped the country. And essentially, they are saying that it would be unjust for them to be brought back to South Africa on those various grounds that they have successfully launched before the High Court. Of course, there are other legal avenues that the South African government can still explore. I think it's also interesting because there is an application by the NPA that's going to be heard on Tuesday, on the 4th of November, before the Constitutional Court, in which these extradition matters, many extradition matters, are going to be thrust to the fore, in that there was a Supreme Court of Appeal judgment that essentially placed the power to extradite with the Justice Department instead of the NPA. And so we do see that in this particular matter, it is the Justice Department that had actually launched the application for the extradition of the Bushiris. But what that application before the Constitutional Court essentially seeks to do is to appeal the retrospective effect of extradition, of the judgment of the Supreme Court of Appeal in extradition matters, because the NPA argues that that will have a backdated effect, that retrospectivity in law means a backdated effect in terms of all the other applications that the NPA has essentially applied for in other states for extraditions of several other figures. And so that is an application that will be heard before the Constitutional Court, and certainly will also bring finality in relation to who has the power when it comes to applying in extradition matters to another state as a requesting state that South Africa would be. And so that is something that will also assist in extradition matters. Of course, a blow for South Africa at this moment, but certainly South Africa still has other legal avenues to pursue.
Absolutely. But again, there's also, of course, the conversation of public perception. You know, what would this mean as well for the victims, of course, that were in this matter when it comes to the Bushiris and the charges, of course, that they still very much face in South Africa?
Well, there's a legal maxim that says the wheels of justice grind slowly, but grind exceedingly fine. And so it is hoped that the alleged victims in these instances would receive justice upon the finality of such a matter. We have not yet reached out to the Justice Department, but we will be looking at that going forward to see how they plan to tackle this particular issue going forward.
Oh, Zoleka, thank you so much for your time. Indeed, our reporter there, Zoleka Qodashe, speaking to us, of course, about the recent outcome in regards to bringing back home those controversial couple, the Bushiris, of course, to face those charges here in South Africa.